Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Totally Amazing Mushrooms. And welcome to all our new subscribers. Thank you so very much for coming along on our journeys with us. We've got a great show for you today. We've got some gnarly ones, we've got some pretty ones, and we've got some edible ones. We've got a lot of history to go along with it, so come for a walk with us, see what we can see. So our first little specimen we're going to find today is of the Armillaria genus. And these are the honey mushrooms. Now the honey name comes from their color, not from the actual flavor of them. But yeah, they were originally all grouped into one, the Armillaria amelia. And in Europe, they realized that there was 5 different species there, or 5 different ones that had different characteristics. So they put them, they called them EBS, A through E, so that's European Biological Species. And in North America they did the same thing. They had 10 different ones that had different characteristics, and so they called those the North American Biological Species, or NABs, Roman numeral I through X. Yeah, so eventually they got their proper species name. They took them out of that weird nomenclature and put them into where they belonged. Now, one of the neat features about the Armillaria genus is their mycelium have some minor biological activities going on. They got some bioluminescence qualities and they don't need the UV lights. So that's one neat thing. And even their fruiting bodies are bioluminescent, so that's pretty neat too. These guys can form huge mycelial networks, and how they do this is they use what they call rhizomorphs. And what that is basically it's just kind of a bunch of the mycelium that's all corded up together, and they form these kind of tendril things. And as they're cruising along under the forest floor, what they're doing is they're looking for the next food source, and they make massive areas, and they're kind of black, kind of shoestring kind of things, and pretty wild. But in eastern Michigan, one of the biggest biological organisms in the world is the Armillaria gallica. And it forms just around, I think it's around 8 square kilometers, which is massive. And in Oregon, on the west side of the continent, is the largest biological organism in the world. And that one is the Armillaria solidipes. And oh, look at these fascicularia. Wow, man. These guys were the ones that we did in the UV light. When they were just little buttons, they've just gotten monstrous. Wow. Anyways, we did all of that in last episode. Let's carry on. So yeah, so they've got these giant mycelial areas, not like the, say, the Colybiopsis paranata or the Colybiopsis, however you want to pronounce it, where they do those big mycelial mats. Those are only, sometimes a few square feet and whatnot. But yeah, right on. So we're coming up on those guys, and we'll get us all set up and we'll get a little closer. Right on. So these guys are just everywhere in here in this alder stand. These are, which are a hardwood. This is the Alnus rubra. That's this guy, growing right off the base of this one here too. And these guys are all connected with that rhizomorph, like I was saying. And here's another thing too, is we talked about getting a spore print without doing a spore print. Here's so we know that they've got a white spore print because we're getting in here, and you can see when you pull back this one, you can see all the spores on it. Actually, I'll pull this one out of the way. There, you can see all the spores there. So those you can see that it's got a white spore print. Oh yeah, it's just loaded there. So, but yeah, very crazily growing all through here. Yeah, amazing. Now, question is it Armillaria gallica? Is it Armillaria calvescens? Is it Armillaria solidipes or ostoya? Or is it Armillaria sinapina? Alright, well, let's pull one up and we'll set the tripod down and we'll go over some of its characteristics and try and narrow down the species. Alright, so you can see on these guys, they've got these really, really fine hairs that almost look like they've got scales, kind of, but they're these fine little hairs just clump up together. And just, it's really neat, and they run up the cap. It's so bizarre. So the gills start out white, and then they turn this buff color. And when these guys flare up, they'll kind of be decurrent, kind of run down the stipe a little bit. They have a nice ring. Alright, so is it Armillaria sinapina? Well, that one has a tendency to have kind of a yellowish tinge to its ring. Alright, so this one does not, and that's most of the time. They also have affinity to break down betulin. And betulin is one of the major components in the birch tree sap. So they are kind of prone to go with the birch. So there's another reason to take this one off the list. So is it Armillaria gallica? It's also known as bulbosa, or it's also known as lutea. Well, it's kind of bulbous at the base. But here's the thing, is those guys are kind of rare around here. They're mostly on the east side of the Rockies and east side of the Cascades. And they're very, very close relative, and it's so close in appearance that you literally have to go microscopic and get a DNA, is the calvescens. So the Armillaria calvescens is very similar to the gallica. And both are kind of dominant on the east coast, or at least east of the Rockies and east of the Cascades. So I'm kind of going to knock those guys off because of their rarity. So now that leaves us down to Armillaria solidipes, also known as ostoya. So funnily enough, you're going, why do they have two different names? Well, they have two different names because in 1970 it was named Armillaria ostoya. I can't remember the fella's name, but anyways, he didn't realize that in 1900 it was already named by Charles Horton Peck, and you've probably heard me mention that name before. So anyway, so after the 1970, it kind of went back and forth between them for, a few decades, till about 2011, when they decided that ostoya was the accepted nomenclature, binomial nomenclature. However, solidipes is still accepted, so don't worry about it. If somebody tries to make you feel silly with the nomenclature, throw that little tidbit information at them. So yeah, these guys, are they edible? Yeah, they are. The stipes are kind of fibrous. You're not going to probably want to use that. It's the cap is the main thing. And these guys are actually a choice edible, believe it or not. So they've got protein in them, and they've got fiber, and they've got some carbs and vitamin B3. Now, one of the things that they've been finding with these guys, which is just awesome, because it's a different way that they've found to help the Alzheimer patients. We'd mentioned that in another episode of another mushroom. They unclog the proteins in our brains, and those can slow down our synaptic junctions, stop them from snapping. So they've been working with that in the lab, and they're hoping to use it towards helping the Alzheimer's patients in unclogging all the proteins out of their brains and freeing up the synaptic junctions. So wouldn't that be bloody amazing? That is just awesome. Now, as I mentioned about these guys, how they can be parasitic, well, are parasitic, and they'll attack the roots of live trees, where most of the saprotropic ones are eating the dead wood. These guys will parasitize the live trees. And if you remember back in episode 11, we talked about the Helvella fasciculare, and they've been using it to displace the Armillaria mycelium from the trees. So yeah, the fasciculare, they move in, and they don't like having other mycelium growing in their wood, so they boot out these guys that have already decomposed part of the roots. And then hopefully, after these guys are booted out, after the fasciculare say, "Hey, you guys gets out of here," then hopefully they've got some viable roots that are still going to keep the tree alive. And then I also wanted to show you the button, and they've got this cottony veil. And yeah, and this is what's protecting it. And inside, these guys, you're going to find it can be sometimes quite cottony and like that, see? Yeah, and they're very, very fibrous stock, so you're probably not going to want to use those. But you can see here's a good example of those fine hairs. If the camera will actually focus. I think I got my fingers too close. There we go. Yeah, so they look kind of like scales, but wild. Yeah, just amazing. So I think that's all the information I have on the Armillaria for you today. If I come up with anything new, we'll put it in a later episode. But we got more mushrooms to go look at, so we're going to end this one here. Hey, a little thing I forgot to tell you about the Laccaria is they had huge antimicrobial and biofilm properties, and especially against the Staphylococcus aureus and the MRSA, Staphylococcal aureus. So yeah, they break down that biofilm, and which also breaks down the resistance to a bunch of the antibiotics. So just a little add-in for the Luciolentes luciolentes. All right, right here we have a lovely little specimen. Look at these brick-colored guys with these little kind of warty kind of things on the top. This is Gymnopilus luteifolius. Now in 1875, Charles Horton Peck called it Agaricus luteifolius, because back then all guild mushrooms got thrown into the Agaricus genus. And only about 12 years later, Pierre Secorda called it Pholiota luteifolius. And then, all the way up till 1951, Rolf Singer finally put it into the Gymnopilus genus. These guys are called the yellow gild gym, and we're going to just take them off here, take a look at them. If I can get them off, pinch them off, there we go. So there you can see the yellow gills, and they got a rusty brown spore print just like the jumbos. Now, are they edible? Well, first off, they're bitter. Second off, no, they're classified as toxic and poisonous. They do, like several of the gyms, have psilocybin in them and psilocin. So they are psychoactive, apparently. But the poisonous constituents make you not want to be doing anything with these guys. Besides the fact, the days of my silly mushrooms are long, long gone. Those were college days. But yeah, these guys are just amazing. They're very, very bitter as well. And you can kind of see the ring zone there where the ring was. And the gills are attached. And these guys will also, their caps will go from this brick kind of color to, they'll fade to like a yellowy color. So that's a really neat little feature of them too. But they're not fussy, kind of like me. But beautiful little specimens, and on our little cypress stump here. And they'll grow on hardwoods too, they don't care. Oh, it looks like we have some Helvella vespertina by the looks of things. Well, these guys are just amazing looking. I'm going to pull this one up. They're just gnarly looking. Look at this stipe. This is the elfin saddle, the slate elfin saddle. Kind of looks like a saddle actually if you look at it. Kind of wild. So a few things about these guys. These guys can get actually parasitized by two different species. One would be the Clytosobe species, the Sclerotoidea, and the other one is a Hypomyces, which is the same as the one that attacks. It's not the same Hypomyces lactiflorum, but it is of the same genus, and I can't remember the species name of it, but it attacks these guys, same as it attacks the Russula buttons to form the lobster mushrooms. So yeah, that's a pretty neat thing. Are these guys edible? Now in 1777, it was described as Helvella mitra, and that was by John Lightfoot, no relation to Gordon. The legend lives on from the Lacinosa down to the Vespertina and the Crispa. And, sorry about that. So, he says, yeah, they were edible, but just not noteworthy. And then in 1883, along comes a Swedish botanist. His name was Adam, what was his name? Afzelius. Adam Afzelius. And he renamed it to Helvella lacinosa. And so that stayed that name for long until 2013, when they started doing a lot of DNA testing, and they found out that the sequencing of the DNA in the west coast, the PNW Helvella lacinosa species, was slightly different from the ones on the east side of the Rockies and the east side of the Cascades, as well as Indo-Asia and the European Union. So they got named Vespertina. So that was their whole movement on the names there. And the great thing is, right beside us here, we have one that has been infected by the hypomyces. And you're going to see this white powdery kind of substance on them. And it can kind of sometimes be pink. And I've got another one here that actually has the pink tinges. I just hope that it's going to pick it up. Yeah, just kind of right there is kind of the pinkish part. So, funnily enough, with the hypomyces, how the lobster mushrooms come out so orange, and then these guys have this pinky color, kind of neat. Now, when these guys get attacked by the Clitosopi sclerotoidea, they're going to form this kind of a biomass under the ground, and sometimes it'll kind of hump up out of the dirt. And I honestly, the first time I saw them, I thought it was like, I've got a white truffle, my goodness. Is that ever cool? Yeah, it wasn't a white truffle. Thank you to one of our amazing subscribers. When I put the call to action out, when I was looking for the actual name of the biomass, and it happened to be the Clitosopi, so that was really wicked. Now, in India and in some of the Scandinavian countries, they classify these as edible, and they've been eating them for centuries. Now, whether or not they boil them twice, light a candle, ring a bell, and read an incantation to make them not toxic, I don't know. They are related to the Gyromitra esculenta, which is the brain mushroom, and that one's got some nasty toxins in there. And they're going to mess up your liver function, and you're going to get kidney failure, or possibly, anyways, those are the most extreme cases. No deaths, surprisingly. However, they did do a bunch of lab testing on these guys, on the Lacinosa species out of Kashmir, India. And they found that these guys were extremely high in fatty acids, but they also had the ability to protect our DNA from damage, which is another great thing. And the last thing that they found was that they have immunoregulatory properties. So amazing. But yeah, am I going to eat it? No. Just one of the facts that it's related to the Gyromitra esculenta? No. The other thing is, it looks like something out of Terminator 13 or something. In the year 3029, Skylab introduces fungal mycelium into the Terminators to create the ultimate biological weapon. Coming to a theater near you. Yeah, so, pretty wild looking, eh? Just so neat. A bunch of cables all bound together. Yeah, so not going into the pot for me. Now there is also a white version of these guys, and that's the Helvella crispa. And one way you can tell the difference between them and these guys, or maybe the parasitized one, because they do go with this white color like the crispa, is the crispa's cap is not attached. Like this one in certain little spots along the way. There's one there and a couple there. The cap is attached, whereas on the crispa it's completely free floating. So it would be kind of sitting there like that over top of the stipe. So they do have trace amounts of gyromitrin, which is the main component in the Gyromitra esculenta. Now we're going to move on to his pretty little neighbor. As far as I know, that's about all I got for information at this point in time. And here's what I was talking about with that pink coloring from the hypomyces after it has parasitized the Helvella. Yeah, just a little close up to give you an example of what I was talking about. The other one really was just barely getting a little bit on the pinkish side, and this one is much more. Alright, so just leaving the Helvella, and we're on our way to its pretty little neighbor. And that pretty little neighbor would be my number 3 in my top 5 aesthetically pleasing mushrooms. And yeah, so we're going to see Laccaria amethystio occidentalis, or occidentalis, however you like to pronounce it. No big deal. Kind of a big name, like all hyphenated and everything, you know, it's like throwing together marmalade, watermelon, and I don't know, wheelbarrow all together. So, where'd it get its name from? In 1977, we have a British mycologist. Yeah, and his name was William Hudson. Willie Hud is what they called him in the mycology circles. And he threw it in the, guess what genus? Agaricus, because it has gills. Yeah, so he called it Agaricus amethystinus. And it stayed that name for a good 110 or so years or something like that. 1882 or 3 or somewhere in there, along comes Mordecai Cook. Now you may remember in episode 11, I just got to jump the creek here. Episode 11, we were talking about the Laccaria laccata, and Morty Cook also took that one out of the Agaricus genus and threw it into the Laccaria genus. So anyways, he did that and he called it Laccaria amethystina. And so it stayed like that for a little bit, but for some reason it got thrown into the Colibia genus because of its stipe. So it's kind of a fibrous stipe like the Colibias, and they last a long time. So either way, didn't stay there for long. And then 1922, now who they are, I don't know, probably a panel or a committee of mycologists, they decided it was a variant of Laccaria laccata. So that one was weird, so they called it Laccaria laccata variant amethystina. And then, finally in 1984, along comes Mueller. Yeah, I love that movie. Anyways, along comes Mr. Mueller, and he realized it had characteristics that were different on the west coast here in the western hemisphere from the one in the eastern hemisphere. So he renamed it Amethystio occidentalis, because occidentalis means western. And the eastern hemisphere, their amethystina got named orientalis, so it's Amethystio orientalis, because they had different traits. Now, from what I understand, the one from Europe can absorb some heavy metals and a couple of toxins and stuff like that, but it might be where they were finding them, you know, if they were around some kind of industrial site or something like that. You can pick up some bad ones, but, you know, the Coprinellus micaceus, it absorbs them too. But, yeah, but they've also got copper and zinc and other good things in them. So, yeah, so that's how the nomenclature came about, and it got its binomial name. So pretty cool. We're coming up on the Amethystio pretty quick here, so I'll see you in a minute. And here they are, my number 3 top aesthetically pleasing mushrooms. Look at these beautiful creatures. Yeah, alright, so we talked all about their taxonomic history. Let's talk about them themselves. Let's start out, are they edible? Well, in the Western Hemisphere, yeah. In the Eastern Hemisphere, no, they suck up a lot of heavy metals, and they can bring in some toxins as well. So you got to be careful over there. I eat these all the time. Just the caps, though, the stipe is very fibrous. And one of the neat things is these guys keep their color. So that's a beautiful little thing about them. And I think you all know by now that I like my comparisons. So we have our Amethystio occidentalis. We have the bicolor, and we also have a Laccaria. So I want you to see, this is the bicolor, and the gills have already faded. They were like a light lilac. But here's one indicator about these guys to the bicolor. See the base of the stipe, how purple that is? That's a big indicator of the bicolor. And it doesn't have quite the stipe that the occidentalis has. If you look at that, there's a big comparison. And then you can even throw the Laccaria right beside it. Yeah, let's go like that. So these guys will get even more buff. And yeah, but you can still maybe see it. I can see it here, but I don't know if the camera's picking up. It's still slightly lilac. So really neat. One thing about the bicolor that I found out, so these guys are actually carnivorous fungi. And I'm not talking about like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes or anything like that, but these guys will devour, like their mycelium, they grab nematodes and little, what do they call those things, switchtails, or anyways, little tiny microbes and things like that, and they lock onto them and they absorb all their nutrients. So yeah, pretty wild. That's one of the things. The other thing is that they have introduced, well, you know how I was talking about in one of the episodes there, how they put the Laccaria, and they've been using their mycelium for the forest industry, introducing them to the roots of the young saplings. Well, with the bicolors, they're doing the same sort of thing, but they're doing it in the agricultural industry. So because they'll make a ectomycorrhizal connection with the plants that they seem to be harvesting and growing. So that's just wild. Here's an older version of, and you can see how much the colors of the gills stay, even though the top is starting to buff out. Yeah, but beautiful. Now, again, there's not a lot of lab reports done on these guys. They've only done 15% or so of the tens of thousands of species. But these guys, I did read that they are high in antioxidants, and they, particularly in the fact that they protect our DNA from damage. And our DNA gets damaged constantly all the time. We just don't know it. Anything that gets damaged to the point that it's going to affect us, normally our immune system can get in there and attack it. So this is what we have for all our little white spore printed Laccarias. And by the way, they're all edible, just not noteworthy at all. So, but the Amethystio occidentalis keeps that beautiful color. Like, I mean, look at how vibrant. It's just amazing. Love, love, love the mushrooms, man. So cool. I just forgot, there is a look-alike for these guys, and of the Cortinarius, the violet quartz. And they've got more of a bell-shaped kind of cap. And another thing is their gills get kind of a modelly colored, because they've got these rusty orangey spores. So they can make the gills not as beautifully vibrant as the Amethystio occidentalis. And another thing is the Cortinarius will have like a ring zone, and a lot of times those orange spores land on that ring zone, and it shows up as a kind of an orange ring going all the way around it. So that's pretty neat. Plus also their caps are always quite warty. They're kind of bumpy and rough. These guys have slight roughness to them, but not quite as protruding as the other ones are. But yeah, they're both just as beautiful. And also the Cortinarius, they say, some people say it's edible, some field guides say it's not. But worst case scenario, stomach distress, you're not going to get killed from the violet quart, apparently. At least that's the information that I have read anyways. Well, there was a few more fungi I wanted to get to today, but apparently I talked too much. Sorry about that. We'll try and shorten her down a little bit for the next video. And those fungi that we didn't get to today, they'll go into that one. So if you enjoyed what you saw today, please hit the like and subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching, everyone.